chunks, to put it in perspective, and you will see that with time. We are top 5 in 10 of the world's most important critical minerals. 40% of the world's listed mining companies are in Canada, to give a perspective there. We are a leading developer of AI, and our research universities are some of the biggest producers in volume of AI, computing, and quantum talent in the world. Unfortunately, most of them go to the United States. I understand you're changing your visa policy here, so you're going to hang on to a few of those. We have capital. Our pension funds are some of, if not the most sophisticated infrastructure investors in the world, with all due respect to Larry Fink. And our government, we were talking about him earlier. I have lots of respect for Larry Fink, I should say that. And we have a government that still has fiscal capacity to act decisively at a moment when governments need to act decisively. Now, the second reason why I'd say we have good prospects, not assured prospects, but good prospects, is we have values to which much of the world, not all of the world, much of the world still aspires. We're a pluralistic society that works. Our cities are amongst the most diverse in the world. Public square is loud, diverse, and free. We, by the nature of our federation, we have to practice collaboration and partnership, and it's a country that is still committed to sustainability. And the third reason why I'm going to argue we can thrive in this time is we recognize what's going on. This is not a transition, this is a rupture. This is a sharp change in a short period of time, driven by a variety of factors. We have a determination to rise up and meet this. And I'm going to give you one last set of threes, and then we'll have our conversation. Our response to this is to build strength at home, to build resilience by diversifying abroad, and pursue a variable geography to defend our values and pursue our interests. So just on strength at home, I can understand if you were distracted by events down here and you haven't followed exactly everything we've been doing in the last 4 months. But while you were otherwise occupied, we've cut taxes on incomes and capital gains. We have removed all federal barriers to interprovincial trade. We have passed landmark legislation to fast-track literally hundreds of billions of dollars of projects in energy, in AI, in critical minerals, in new trade corridors. We are doubling our defense spending by 2030. Our core capabilities with respect to defense, AI, quantum, cyber, critical minerals, provide unique opportunities for dual use and economic benefit, and we intend to fully exploit those. We are diversifying our trading relationships and our security partnerships. We signed the most comprehensive agreement with the European Union from a non-European Union member. The Economic and Security Partnership with the EU, we signed that at the end of June. We're working on fleshing that out now. We will be, or we are on track, I should choose my words more diplomatically, we are on track to be a full member of SAFE, the European Defence Arrangement, which allows us to diversify and accelerate our defense procurement. This week? What day is Monday? Last week, yes. Seemed to miss the weekend in the middle, but we agreed a comprehensive approach within the context of USMCA, but a comprehensive approach with Mexico to deepen our bilateral trading relationships, and we are pursuing more aggressive strategies throughout Asia. My last of my threes is around that variable geography. I'll just give a couple of examples of where we're active. The Coalition of the Willing for Ukraine, we are the largest contributor on a per capita basis to Ukraine. Okay. And we, well, I won't go into more detail. We can talk about Ukraine if you wish. When you think about our Arctic sovereignty, that we are cooperating very closely with the Nordic Baltic 8 for physical protection up there, economic development, and also defending NATO's western flank. We are active with like-minded parties in efforts to promote a two-state solution and Middle East peace. Not the easiest thing to do, I know. And I'll make one other point on critical minerals. We, out of the G7, are forming buyers clubs for critical minerals so that the world can diversify away from Chinese dominance from them. So it's not just the supply, but it's having that secure access to capital or an offtake, basically, so these can be developed. And I'll just say a word before I finish that having chaired the G7 this year, I came into government 6 weeks before it was there, so we didn't have Mike Froman. We had very good Sherpa, but we didn't have Mike Froman, so we had a lot of work to do. It was a very interesting, and this is a variable geometry support point. When we had 2 days, the first day, core G7, focused on a variety of issues, very productive. President Trump was there for that day. And these were good meetings. These were good discussions, a good meeting. There was progress made. Not everything landed, but it's never the case that everything lands. It was fairly narrowly focused, though, on economics with Iran thrown in. There's always a crisis, Iran thrown in as well. The next day, with the leaders of most of the BRICS countries, some of the largest emerging economies, Australia as well, not an emerging economy, but others like those. The focus was on what this room would recognize as old multilateralism, global commons, where we're cooperating on energy, what we can do to actually develop on critical minerals, financing for development, what's going to happen at COP. Lula was there as well. That doesn't mean that's the way the world's working. I'm not naive about that, but there is a substantial proportion of the world that focuses on these issues. A country like Canada is one of them, and it's one that it's something we will continue to do because it comes back into our strengths. Look, I'll sum up. I would ask you to, when you think about Canada, actually, that's my request. Think about Canada. As a strong, sovereign, independent nation, think about Canada as that. But there is a big opportunity in this shifting in Canada. We understand what's going on. We understand the scale of the response that's required. We have the resources the world needs. We have the talent to turn that potential into growth. We're a reliable partner. We're connected more than anyone else through trading relationships with any other part of the world. And we're no longer relying on just the strength of our values, but the value of our strength with your help. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
Well,
Hi, boss.
Bienvenue.
Merci.
Welcome to the United States of America. Sorry, I didn't mean that as a point on sovereignty. I just meant, did you get through customs okay? They recognize the Canadian passport still?
Still working.
Still working. Excellent. Yeah. Let me pick up on a couple of the points that you made. You talked about diversification and the strengths within Canada. Canada's been so reliant on the U.S. economy, been so integrated. Yeah. I think something like 2/3 of Canadians live within 100 kilometers of the border. Most of the trade is here. You've had some economic headwinds in the last several months in terms of economic contraction and higher unemployment. How much can you reorient the Canadian economy, both to be more east-west than north-south, or to be more integrated with other economies than the U.S., given the long history there?
Yeah, it's the right question, and the answer to the question starts with recognizing the need to do it. One thing I'd impress upon the audience is that Canadians understand the need to, as we put it, to be masters in our own house. The country does not want to wake up and look on all due respect, on Truth Social or X to see what the latest change is in U.S. policy, but wants to get on with what we can control. And that's a big part of the government strategy. So getting rid of barriers east-west, as you put it, barriers across the provinces, that alone, if it's fully done, we've done the federal part, but if all our provinces reduce their barriers, the estimates are that is a bigger return to the Canadian economy than the worst-case trade outcome with the U.S. Now, one has a more immediate impact, and the other builds over time, but the orders of magnitude are clear. And that's before we do what we need to do, which is to double the rate of housing. We announced a new approach on housing 2 weeks ago, and the first projects that we have identified there scaled to around $50–60 billion of housing investment. The first major projects that I referenced in the remarks on new ports, new energy corridors, beyond, those are measured in the hundreds of billions. So you start to build all of that out before the defense spending kicks in, and we're very focused on dual-use defense spending. There's lots of areas where we're going to be able to build out our AI, cyber, and other capabilities, critical mineral pathways as part of that defense build. And it's before we get traction with those new trade and defense partnerships with Europe, for example, and in Asia. So that's our primary focus. And candidly, we've been done a favor because we should have been, all of these things we could have done before ourselves. So we needed the rupture, we needed the shock, it seems, in order to do them. But there is a very strong consensus in the country to do that. As well, there is a very attractive for the United States, for Canada obviously as well, and Mexico version of USMCA that can be developed. And it's, as you know from your previous life, we're in the early stages of that development.
You've mentioned the defense spending a couple of times. You referred to it as dual use. Yeah. First of all, Canada had been a laggard on defense spending. Trump sort of highlighted that quite pointedly. But now you've committed to, I believe it's 5%, 3.5% of military spending and 1.5% of infrastructure spending. When you talk about dual use, are you talking about, is that in lieu of buying more military equipment per se? Is that or do you see yourself buying more?
It's a couple things. I mean, we have a lot of catch up to do. We're not alone in that in NATO. We're resolute that we will catch up. So we're getting to the 2% level this year, which you can argue we should have been at before, but we're getting there this year. And then you have the ramp up towards 5% by 2035, 5% of GDP by 2035. And for those who don't follow it quite as closely, what we agreed to, everyone in NATO agreed to, is of that 5%, 3.5% is pure defense spending, and 1.5% is related to defense, resilience, building that out. So everything in that 1.5% effectively is dual use and has other benefits for your economy. But even if we set that aside and just focused on the 3.5% of pure, NATO is going to be spending a lot more on cyber, a lot more on AI integrating systems. I'm sure you've had lots of discussions here around drone warfare and the integration there. We will be spending necessarily, from a military perspective, the end uses on some of the critical minerals, I mean, literally are militarily critical. So our development of that for our defense purposes, first and foremost, has direct spillover benefits because AI expertise, being able to integrate big data lakes and optimize across them, well, that is a skill that is transferable, readily transferable to other aspects of the economy. So we see a lot of the way, this is part of the advantage, last point, part of the advantage of coming late. Sometimes you go to some emerging and developing economies and have much better cell coverage because they came late. They did it right. we're coming late to some of the spend, but at a time when the nature of security and conflict and warfare and what's needed is changing very rapidly, and it actually plays to some of our strengths.
Let me ask you to put not only your prime minister hat on, but you've been a central bank governor, you've been an investor, you've been in finance. Looking around the world now, you've got China sort of playing by its own playbook economically, including a lot of excess capacity that's being exported to the rest of the world. You have the U.S. playing by its own playbook, ignoring various agreements, including at times USMCA. What does it mean if the two largest economies of the world are playing by their own set of rules? What does that mean for the rules-based system for a middle power like Canada?
Yeah, well...
And do you keep on playing by the rules even if nobody else does?
Okay, so this is the key. So who else is willing to play by the rules, and can you get critical mass in that? That's one of the big questions. So, and nobody's perfect in this, but one of the things about the European Union is it's a rule-based system. Sometimes there's too many rules, and they're playing by too many rules, but it is a rules-based system. We have a free trade agreement with the European Union. CPTPP, newer. The U.S. made a decision not to be part of that.
I heard about that.
Yeah, you heard about that. And it's not too late. You can come back in. But it's not the European Union, obviously, to the same degree. But it's you recognize it as a rules-based, plurilateral trade deal. It has labor standards, has sustainability. There is open discussion. We're part of it. I don't want to overplay it because it's still early days, but of a bridge between the EU and the CPTPP. Well, Canada's in both, effectively. We're deepening with Europe. We're deepening with some of those players there. Then we're in a pretty big system that is rules-based. We would like to think that we will get to a position with the U.S. where we have new rules as part of USMCA, or a reaffirmation of these are the rules of conduct in USMCA. And, we're re-engaging with China and other major economies in terms of developing the rules bilaterally with them. So there's more to play for than there appears. And, one of the things that, now I'm going to be a central banker, but this is important. Okay, this is really exciting. This is a chance to check your phones. But so much of economics is on the margin, right? So, yes, we're heavily weighted to the United States, and a big adjustment is going on in big sectors, steel, autos, as examples, are forest products because of the trade shock, and we're hoping to make progress in all of those. But on the margin, when you grow into very large markets, which are represented by the EU and CPTPP, it makes a big difference. So it's the delta, it's the growth that's going to impact it.
Previous governments in Canada have worked quite closely with the U.S. vis-a-vis China, and sometimes at a great cost for Canada.
Yeah.
How would you assess our joint effectiveness in influencing Chinese behavior, economic strategy, security behavior, et cetera? And what do you think we ought to be doing differently if you think there's room for improvement?
There's always room for improvement. I think one of the things that we can improve on, I'll say this from a Canadian perspective with respect to China, is being clearer about where we engage. I alluded to it very lightly, but it's a general point in variable geometry. You have different tiers of engagement depending on how like-minded you are. So with respect to China or any other country that's, any other, where do you engage deeply? Where are you comfortable engaging deeply? In the commodity space, in aspects of energy, for example, basic manufacturing, where there are guardrails, and what should just be left off to the side. Mm-hmm. Elements that bridge into national security, privacy, other aspects like that. So that's where we can be better, number one. Number two, in my experience with China, they are, amongst other things, very sincere and engaged on climate. This is a country run by engineers. This is a country that understands a lot of the engineering solutions to issues around emission. They've happened to have built real competitive advantage in a number of these areas as well. So there's a question of how, and there's almost a standing offer from them about how to engage in the global comments in and around climate, which a country like Canada, which is it is an energy superpower, when we're certainly going to build and fully exploit that, then we're dealing on, and we care about this issue as well. It's still part of our policy. It's still part of, and so there's an opportunity to engage. Again, the United States could choose that lane very easily, but probably at the moment that's not where the engagement will be.
Right. Well,
probably at the moment.
Probably.
Probably. Who knows? Who knows?
But that you mentioned your chairmanship of the G7. Yeah. The U.S. takes over the chair of the G20 later this year. Yeah. It'll be an opportunity for the Trump administration to take over one of these organizations and figure out what the agenda is for international cooperation. You and I have been involved in a bunch of G20 summits. You did somewhat better in your career than I did in mine. But what advice would you give to the Trump administration about where the G20 could be useful and what the scope for cooperation can be going forward?
Wow.
It's called Stump the Prime Minister.
I didn't see that one coming, but that's the right question. Look, as you know, with these things, you want to pick three things and focus. You do want it because it's a sprawling agenda, and you got to be clear. This is what we care about. I actually think that I would emphasize. I think the infrastructure, they won't call it this, but I'll use this term, but infrastructure for development, the infrastructure for the global economy, the leveraging of limited public dollars into multiples of private dollars. That is an agenda that's good for the world. It's an agenda that plays directly into American strengths in finance, American strengths in, just a whole host of industries. It can play a bit complementary into Chinese and other countries' strengths, but more America's than elsewhere. And it's an agenda, if really pursued, will grow jobs and good things back in America, but also would be enthusiastically endorsed by the broader group of the G20, and it would reinforce purpose at some of those. And this is a question whether the administration wants to, but some of the multilateral organizations. So the World Bank's agenda is effective. It's a big part of that agenda. So putting their own frame in and around that, I think, makes a lot of sense. I've got two others, but I'm worried that we're not going to have enough time for the audience to ask questions. So
very diplomatic. All right. One last question before we open it up to the group. I believe yesterday Canada joined some European countries in recognizing Palestinian statehood. What do you expect that to accomplish?
Well, I think the first thing to say is this is consistent with our policy since 1947. Every Canadian government, whether of whatever political stripe, has supported a two-state solution, as many other countries have. What we have been seeing, first because of the acts of these heinous acts of Hamas, but then other in terms of response, is that prospect is receding before our eyes. Okay. So the idea of waiting until all the conditions are in place for a free and viable Palestinian state committed to peace and security side by side with the state of Israel, is what I've called a Zionist Palestinian state, which is what we want. Those conditions being in place, keeping the concept there on the shelf when it is the avowed policy of the Israeli government that there will never be a Palestinian state. That is the policy of the current Israeli government, and their actions are consistent with that policy. And I can just concentrate on what's going on in the West Bank without touching Gaza. So what we're looking to accomplish is to keep that front and center, to be with a host of influential but not decisive countries. So we're alongside the Kingdom of Saudi, not in the recognition, but as part of this process. Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, France, UK, Australia, Qatar, Egypt, others, Norway, actively trying to create conditions at a minimum for a ceasefire, obviously, and then a peace process. That's part of that. And it's not, we're under no illusions that this is any sort of panacea, but it's necessary in our judgment, and the judgment of most other countries in the world, that we have to push on this now because, as I say, the possibility, in absolute violation of the UN Charter and in absolute violation of international law, of self-determination for the Palestinian peoples is being erased. So we're doing what we can, but recognizing the limitations.
All right. Well, we're going to open it for questions. This is on the record. In addition to the very full room we have here, we've got about over 400 people, 400 CFR members online as well. Please, if recognized, stand up, wait for the microphone, identify yourself, and ask a brief question. Okay? Yes, this gentleman right here.
George Vredenberg of the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative, a successor to Seppi and Gavi, but focused on aging populations. So my question is a demographic question. Working age populations in Europe are shrinking. Yeah. Working age populations are supporting a larger population overall. How does one deal with the financial costs of that? How does one deal with how to increase worker productivity in the global north?
Are you taking a few, or do you want me to
do?
Look, absolutely right. One of the biggest challenges, I think one of the first things you have to do as a government, we haven't fully done this, but we will in time, is to actually frame the policy and frame. Australia does this with their intergenerational reports, basically, which frames under current trajectories and with demographics what the challenges are. That's the first. The second is you maximize your labor force participation as much, female participation, older participation. We are pretty good on that. We have a bit more to do later in career, for all countries, that's the next step. Clearly, the deployment of technology, AI coming in. It's not like AI is going to solve everything, but that the multiplier effects there gotten right. There's a variety of reasons why we have to get application of AI right across our economies. This is one of them, and it provides some counterweight to that, and potentially substantial counter. I mean, okay, I'll be not utopian, but optimistic. Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say Panglossian, but then I was like, that's so optimistic. But if you take sort of full bore productivity estimates on AI application, it's adding 1 to 1.5 percentage points on productivity and I'll push it out to the middle of the next decade. It actually dovetails pretty well with that bigger demographic crunch. I mean, those are big numbers in annual productivity. So we have to get that right. And one of the challenges for us, of course, is to do that alongside everyone else. Yeah.
Maureen White. Microphone coming.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you, Mark, for being with us today. I'm Maureen White, and I'm a senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Institute at SAIS, and I'm also chairman of the Board of Refugees International. And Mark, Canada has had an exemplary role in refugee resettlement for many, many years. And I know your country, and you're not alone in this, is backtracking a little bit on this commitment to refugee assistance. Could you just elaborate a little bit on what the Canadian policy on refugee resettlement will be going forward?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not, Maureen, now that they've taken the microphone away from you, I'm not sure I fully recognize the backtracking element of your question. And, you know, I'll put it in context. I see the Ukraine pin on the previous questioner and salute you for it. We've taken 300,000 Ukrainian families into Canada, individuals, I should say, individuals into Canada. We still have quite substantial levels of asylum seekers, and you know the Ukrainian case is a humanitarian, deliberate policy. The asylum seeker obviously is received. We, like every country, must control and be deliberate with respect to our borders and manage appropriately. And so the government is very focused on doing that on the border side, but also treating asylum seekers, treating everyone who comes to Canada to the standards they should, and that includes processing claims in a timely fashion. And one thing we have not done well enough is process claims in a timely fashion. So that's resources and efficiency. And so I would say when we look at, that's the aspect of your question that I would bear down on. Yeah.
Let's get to an online question.
Okay. We will take the virtual question from Missy Ryan.
Hi, this is Missy Ryan from The Atlantic magazine. I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about what you mentioned earlier several times about Canada's values-based approach to international relations and as a sort of guiding compass more generally, and how you're thinking about doing that in a moment where the Trump administration is not talking about a values-based foreign policy and more the America First is, as it's articulated, is more about American interests and sometimes backing away from some of the values that have been articulated by the United States and its foreign policies. How are you going to do that, especially given the United States clout as a kind of trendsetter on certain issues like the Palestinian state and Ukraine, Russia, and all of that?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Missy. Look, I'll give a couple of examples and then pick up on your. Let me pick up on Palestinian state, Ukraine. There are other examples of this where, look, we believe in the UN Charter. We believe in self-determination for peoples. We underscore the importance of territorial integrity. And that drives our approach in Ukraine. It drives our approach in Palestine as well. There are other applications, but I'll stop there. That's a consistent approach. We welcome, and I very much welcome his personal involvement of the president in efforts, for example, in Ukraine to broker ceasefires, to find paths for peace, to provide potentially complements to the security guarantees that the Coalition of the Willing, Canada included, are prepared to provide to Ukraine, which is necessary for a lasting peace or lasting security for Ukraine. The situation, this is no insight, the situation in Palestine is both horrific and fluid. And there are multiple efforts, very much including by the United States, to find a path to cessation of hostilities, ultimately security and some form of peace. We come at both those situations from somewhat different perspective, but the same ultimate goal. And we have different partners at present in some of the initiatives, in both of those initiatives. But we would hope that there would be convergence with the United States. And we will certainly support leadership of the United States that's leading to outcomes that are consistent with our values.
Some European countries have suggested they would deploy troops to Ukraine as part of a stability force or peacekeeping force. Would Canada be among those?
Well, we'll see what the structure is. We're very active in the Coalition of Willing. I'd remind that we have very large troop presence in Latvia as part of our NATO obligations. I visited them 3 weeks ago. And to underscore the commitment to security in the region, to Latvia and Poland. By the way, the brigades in Latvia, it is not, they don't do training. It's an operational brigade, which gives you, and that's before the incursions, the Russian incursions of recent weeks. And that gives you a sense of both the stakes and the degree of our commitment. So we'll see in terms of Ukraine. There's a lot to be done still to move that first to a cessation of hostility before the guarantees would come into effect. But what we do know, and the United States acknowledges very much, is that without, given the track record of Putin, a security guarantee that's written on paper is not, that if the signature is Vladimir Putin's, is not worth anything.
It's right here in the second row. Lou. Microphone coming up. There you go.
Thank you, Allison Sander, Planet Action. First of all, just want to start with a thank you for those of us who forget what leadership and diplomacy looks like. We follow you, and it reminds us, and I think I'm speaking for the whole room. So start with that. A quick question. I think it's Canadian modesty that you describe yourself as a middle power. I'd kind of bump you up. And could you paint us a picture in these times where IP, capital, and talent can flow so easily? You're a great strategist. What's the strategy for middle powers to use golden parachutes, different tax laws? And is there a coordinated strategy to just take some of the capital from here that's getting frustrated and attract it?
Well, we would never take anything from the United States, to be clear.
That's on the record.
That's on the record. I just want to underscore that we're here to give, not take.
Just not give too much.
Not give too much, exactly. No, like on the, I mean, I think this is our strategy, our core of the strategy is the core, like it's like any organization, yours included, like the core of the strategy has to be consistent with who you are and what your values are, and then you build off of that. So I said in my remarks, the public square is loud, diverse, and free. That's important. It's important to Canadians, but it's important. It's becoming more of a relative thing than it had been in the past. Let's put it that way. The second is look, the country is, it is a very diverse country. It is a very networked country globally. Toronto, New York, it's impressive. It's one of 3 born outside of the U.S. I think it's one of 2 in Toronto. Okay, and it's not. That is a more extreme version, but many Canadian cities look like New York, not in scale, but in diversity. And that is a strength that's there as well. From a tax perspective, I don't think you'll see in Canada, Swiss-type tax deals for individuals. That's not the nature of the society. There is a social model that's consistent. But what is there is those first 2 components combined with very strong research universities that people can come to, a society when people can live in, and a country that is connected to everywhere else in the world, including through trade and investment. And that's something that we will push through, combined with, which is something that isn't always there in Canada, or at least shouted out, which is ambition, and the scale of the ambition. And that's part of how people go to where things are happening or where they think they can be part of something bigger, and that's an important part of the strategy. Yeah. Thank you.
Jane Harman. Front row here.
Jane, how are you?
Jane Harman, former member of Congress. Congratulations to CFR and Canada for superb leadership, which employs delightful humor. It's really refreshing. My question is more about Ukraine. You've answered lots of it, but putting on your banker hat, there has been a bill in the United States Congress for a while, sponsored by Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal, to impose secondary sanctions on Russia to force Putin to change his strategy. That bill isn't passing because Trump does not yet support it, despite a veto-proof majority. But my question is, how potent are secondary sanctions, and should this bill pass, how much difference do you think it would make?
Well, great to see you, Jane. Secondary sanctions can be incredibly powerful, and they were very, very powerful with respect to Iran, and the uncertainty around the extent to which what is secondary, if I can put it that way, particularly in the financial sector, is a powerful weapon. So just for those who don't follow it, it's not just what bank, so to speak, deals directly, in this case with Russia, but does your bank deal with the bank that deals with Russia? So who's your client's client? And once you start asking that question, the risk really does pull in, and the isolation goes up orders of magnitude. The Graham-Blumenthal bill, as I remember, doesn't deal directly with the financial side. It's more of a tariff or trade-related. Is that correct, or am I misremembering? You think it has that financial? I think if it has the financial, I think that is power. It is something we have advocated. Canada has advocated. I've personally advocated some of the discussions, and I will say that the U.S. has raised this issue on several occasions as a possibility. I think it is a possibility. I'm not saying the legislation per se, but the use of secondary sanctions. And our view, Canada's view, and a number of European countries would share this, is that we should go quickly to that, because that really is the biggest non-military disincentive. So I'm glad you raised it, but yes.
Putting your former banker hat on, central banker hat on, would you worry about the impact of secondary sanctions on the role of the dollar going forward in terms of weaponization of finance?
Look, I think this is less. No. I mean, yes, I understand the motivation of the question, but I think these would be very clear, well-motivated reasons, and it would be coming in. You would delay delivery it. You'd say we're going to do it in 2 months or 3 months' time to effectively force Putin to the trilateral table, and it would give time to reorganize relationships accordingly. You always have a risk, as you know, when you do financial sanctions in terms of the impact on the dollar. But it is also this is the thing that needs to be hammered home. It is so difficult to transact even in other currencies with ultimately the chain one step removed, not touching a U.S. person, financial institution, the dollar, that's what gives this such power.
You support using the frozen Russian assets?
You know,
now
when I was a central banker, I didn't, but now that where you stand depends on where you sit.
Depends where you stand, depends on where you sit.
Exactly.
Let's go to an online question.
I'm much more enlightened
we will
now.
We will take the next virtual question from Mark Rosen.
Prime Minister, yesterday, in recognizing a Palestinian state, you set out a demand that Hamas must be disarmed and excluded from any Palestinian government or elections. Can you explain to us who, if not Israel, will carry out that disarmament of Hamas? How will that happen? And if seems highly possible, at least, a movement or political party committed to Israel's destruction, whether under the Hamas name or another banner, ultimately wins those Palestinian elections you've called for next year, won't you have in effect granted Hamas their own state to launch more invasions of Israel?
Thanks for the question. First is the disarmament and elimination of Hamas as a force, certainly as a political force, military force first, and political force, is one of the conditions for a sustained cessation of hostilities and peace. And when you say who is going to do that, there are many proposals, as I suspect you're aware, from a variety of Arab states, combination of Arab states and European states, to which Canada would be party if they were to come to pass, for multinational forces to be deployed in Palestine to enforce a peace and to drive that process forward. So I think the first part of your question I deal with directly that way. The conditions for a free and fair election in Palestine are many, and the time in order to get to that spot is uncertain. The conditions for any form of self-determination of the Palestinian people do not exist at present, and the prospect of them ever being in a position to make decisions in their own land, it is the avowed policy of the current Israeli government to ensure that never happens.
Yes, way in the back.
Thank you. Keith A. Bell, Next Experiences, producer of New York Fashion Week and LA Fashion Week.
Wow. You're in the right
session. I know. Two sons at the University of Toronto, getting a fine education. Thank you.
Good.
One of them is a data science major and determined to start up his own company, and feels compelled, although he loves Canada, is Canadian, would stay up there if he could. But Canada really doesn't have the opportunities that Silicon Valley offers. You know, your joke about immigration policy in the United States aside, isn't that a problem? Why drive your brilliant young Canadians to the United States because the capital markets doesn't have the category of capital to support their new ideas? And is there a solution?
Yeah, I think the first thing, thanks for the question. Thanks for sending your kids back home. If that's right. And I would flip it a bit in that how much are we driving people to Silicon Valley, and how much is Silicon Valley and Seattle, for that matter, sucking in and attracting, and I don't mean that negative, but just the sheer weight of the opportunity in the United States. And this is true whether you're Canadian, Israeli, European, Indian. You know, this is not a unique phenomena to Canada. That 50% of probably one of the best, I'll hedge, places to do computer engineering, all forms of it, is Waterloo. 50% of the graduating class every year goes to the United States, and we need to retain more of those. Part of it is the ecosystem, the venture capital ecosystem. I actually don't think that's to be honest, I don't think that's the biggest thing. I'm not saying there aren't things that we shouldn't be doing there. I think it's, in part, it's the demand. Part of it is the demand for the end product. So the ability to scale in Canada is more limited, has been more limited for a variety of reasons. Part of it, our companies aren't applying things as much as U.S. ones. A lot of that is going to change in AI, crypto, cryptography. Cryptography is when I say crypto, I don't mean crypto, and in quantum, because we're gonna drive a lot of that, and spin-offs of that. Doesn't mean we'll keep everybody, but we'll keep more.
I mean, the president just had an interesting visit to the UK.
Yeah.
And signed this major technology agreement. UK is going to get hundreds of billions of dollars potentially of investment into their AI infrastructure. Could Canada cut a similar deal with the United States? Yeah,
we could cut. We would like to cut a similar deal. The extent to which it needs to be done with the U.S. government it's not clear to me. It has to be done with the U.S. government. I'm happy them to come, but we've got. So what do you need? What do you need for an AI data center? You need power, you need chips, and more often clean power is preferred. You need chips. Wouldn't hurt to have a fiber optic cable that went down to the U.S. Proximity doesn't hurt. And so that strategy of building out the infrastructure that the UK, France, others are pursuing, that makes sense. That makes sense for us. And we've got to make sure that some of our power, those big chunks of power that are coming online, are there. For the overall benefit for Canada, it goes to the previous question and the productivity discussion. That's nice, getting that infrastructure. The big payoff is actually in the application, which means that you want to flow through some of that capacity for Canadian companies, Canadian usage, and actually the education side becomes that much more important.
There's another question right there, about 2/3 of the way back. Yep, gentleman looking back. There you go. Great.
Hi, Andrew Watchers, Morgan Stanley. Mr. Prime Minister, congratulations on passage of the One Canadian Economy Act this summer.
Congratulations on referencing it. Thank you. This is very good.
I wonder if you could say a few more words and give us a few more details on the projects that you're planning to fast track through the approval authorities. What are the size of those projects? When might they be approved and shovel ready? And when might we start seeing those show up in GDP? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So we're going to layer these approvals roughly every 4 months for the course of the next couple of years. We have a series of them that were initially proposed. Canada's a federation. Part of the way we have to get things moving, Parliament gave the government additional powers to fast-track approvals, so 2-year time horizon. And once we designate a project, it's presumed approved, okay? So something has to kind of go off in order for it not to happen, which means that a lot of the engineering and other work can drive through. But part of the way to get things done in Canada, I mentioned this in my remarks, is through partnerships. So we started with the provinces saying, what are your top priorities? And they've given us a bunch of their top priorities. Indigenous peoples, Indigenous rights holders, what are some of their top priorities? Bringing those together and making sure that those are front of the line, front of the queue. What you're going to see is a series of things and you're starting to see them in and around critical minerals, in and around energy, particular, a mixture of conventional and clean. We just greenlit with BC, for example, one of the largest, one of the largest LNG projects, Silesum, which follows hard on the heels of LNG 1 and potentially LNG 2, which is this giant consortium. Those are, just to give a sense of sort of blocks, these are effectively zero carbon LNG because the liquefaction is before the scope 3, obviously, I'll say that, under the control of planet Earth, right? But the liquefaction is done with hydro, very short shipping times to Asia, tons of demand, displaces coal, lots of good things about that. You will see a lot of those types of projects, but in parallel with scale nuclear in Ontario, where the actual FID decisions and the capital is starting to flow. large-scale hydro, 10,000 to 15,000 megawatt hydro in East, and then big corridors and critical minerals that are opened up. Last thing, sorry, this is too long an answer, but the AI infrastructure leg of that strategy is just being developed. We referenced it a few weeks ago around a sovereign cloud because we know that we're the offtake for that, development for that, and you'll see something on that in the next few months.
You've contributed so much to the United States, the UK, the globe, when it comes to climate change, and now you're bringing it back to Canada. We are so privileged to have you here. Thank you for spending time with us.
Thank you.
weaponizing the Department of Justice to demand accountability for those who weaponized the Department of Justice. And nobody knows what that looks like more than President Trump. We are not going to tolerate gaslighting from anyone in the media or from anyone on the other side who is trying to say that it's the president who is weaponizing the DOJ. It was Joe Biden and his attorney general who weaponized the DOJ. Joe Biden used this sacred American institution to go after his political opponent in the middle of an election year. And you look at people like Adam Schiff and like James Comey and like Letitia James, who the president is rightfully frustrated. He wants accountability for these corrupt fraudsters who abused their power, who abused their oath of office to target the former president and then candidate for the highest office in the land. And I think the president is reaffirmed in those frustrations and his hope for accountability by the millions and millions of people who reelected him to this office with a mandate to demand accountability. And the president has not been shy about this, Gabe. In fact, when he traveled to the Department of Justice earlier this year, all of you were there to cover it, he said, quote, "I demand a full and complete accountability for wrongs and abuses that have occurred. The American people gave a mandate to investigate and root the corruption out of our system," and that's what the president wants to see done.
Carolyn.
Ed.
On the autism issue again, there are reams of scientific research that suggests there's no clear link between autism and acetaminophen usage. You're suggesting today they may have new information on this. A lot of it, and this entire debate, has the potential to confuse women, especially pregnant women, about what to do. What do you say to those that say what you're doing today potentially just introduces more confusion into the debate?
I think women for many years, in fact for decades, Ed, have been confused by the rapid increase in autism in this country, in the childhood epidemic, that is chronic epidemic, disease epidemic that is plaguing America's youth. Women are confused about that and they want answers to that. And that's exactly what this administration is focused on finding. And before you jump to conclusions based on reports that the White House has not even confirmed, I would encourage everyone in this room to go into the 4 o'clock announcement with some critical thinking skills and with some open ears to actually listen to what the president and his team of outsiders have to say about this. And there will be a number of things that will be announced and discussed. And I think, I know as a mother myself, I speak, I believe, for many mothers across the country who really want answers to what is happening to our nation's children. So again, I won't get ahead of the president, but I think everyone in this room needs to tone down the judgment before you even hear what people are going to say. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline. So two on the Holman investigation. I mean, can you just speak to, did the president ask the Justice Department to close the case, and does Holman have to return the $50,000?
Well, Mr. Holman never took the $50,000 that you're referring to, so you should get your facts straight, number one. Number two, this was another example of the weaponization of the Biden Department of Justice against one of President Trump's strongest and most vocal supporters in the midst of a presidential campaign. You had FBI agents going undercover to try and entrap one of the president's top allies and supporters, someone who they knew very well would be taking a government position months later. Mr. Holman did absolutely nothing wrong, and even the President's Department of Justice, even Kash Patel's FBI, looked into this just to make sure. They had a number of different prosecutors and FBI agents who looked into this. They found zero evidence of illegal activity or criminal wrongdoing. In the White House and the President stand by Tom Holman 100% because he did absolutely nothing wrong, and he is a brave public servant who has done a phenomenal job in helping the President shut down the border. Mary.
Thanks, Caroline. I have two questions on far-left violence.
Sure.
The first one, the president said yesterday that the bullet hit Charlie, but it was aimed at every one of us. Do you and your colleagues have a heightened sense of fear following this shooting and this far-left violence we're seeing across the country?
I certainly think there's a heightened sense of awareness by conservatives across the country, by all of us here at the White House. Again, as I said to Monica, many of us were personal friends with Charlie and had involvement with Turning Point before we came and served our government in this way. So certainly it's a very shocking incident, and I think, you know, it's very unfortunate that those of us who work in this movement have to think about violence just for speaking our minds and for supporting President Trump.
And as a follow-up on that, I asked the president last night on Air Force One about this pattern of transgender violence we're seeing. You know, Charlie's killer lived with his boyfriend who identifies as transgender, and then we had the Annunciation shooting. the Covenant shooting, all of these incidents. The president said that we're looking into transgender violence. Does that mean the FBI is looking into it? And can you give any more clarity on how the administration is viewing this uptick in specifically transgender violence?
It's definitely something worth looking into, and I think anyone who denies that at this point is being willfully ignorant. And the administration is taking it seriously, all causes of violence, and why these people would be driven to such evil and such hatred. And there's probably many answers to that question, but the administration is really focused on all of them. For individual investigations and cases, of course, the FBI and the Department of Justice are leading those. But as for this overall violence and domestic terrorism that we're seeing, the White House and the president's policy team will be leading the charge, and that really begins with designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. And I can assure you there will be additional actions to come.
Sure, in the pink. Thanks, Caroline. Liz Landers with PBS NewsHour. I just wanted to follow up quickly on something that the president had said yesterday. So we heard from Erica Kirk. She said she forgives the man who shot and killed her husband. And then right after that, we heard from the president who said, I hate my opponent and I don't want the best for them. How does that square with bringing down the temperature of political violence in this country? And then, if I could, I had a follow-up on Venezuela, too.
Look, the president is authentically himself. I think that's why millions of Americans across the country love him and support him, including Erica Kirk, who you saw so beautifully was on stage with the president in an unthinkable moment, in the midst of an unthinkable tragedy, and was leaning on the president for support during that time. And he was there to give it to her, as well as the vice president and many other top-ranking cabinet officials. Kayla.
Thanks, Caroline. On TikTok, the deal. How much is the deal? And if you can't give an exact number to how much the deal is, when can we expect to learn how much the deal is being valued at? And then separately, who are the members involved in the deal? Like, can you share any more details there?
So I don't have a specific number for you, nor am I going to confirm the specific individuals and entities in the deal, Kayla, but I do have several details I'm happy to run through for all of you, and the president will be signing the deal, the official deal, later this week at some point. Under the terms of this deal, TikTok will be owned by a majority of American investors and controlled by a board of directors with extensive national security and cybersecurity credentials. In partnership with the U.S. government, Oracle will serve as TikTok's trusted security provider, and they will independently monitor the safety and data security of all U.S. user data on TikTok's platform. Americans' data will be stored securely in the United States without access from China. All U.S. user data will be stored on servers operated by Oracle in the United States, protected from surveillance or interference by foreign adversaries. And the algorithm, I know this is a question many of you have had, will be secured, retrained, and operated in the United States outside of ByteDance's control. And TikTok will remain globally interoperable, meaning TikTok users in the U.S. will be able to see videos posted by users in other countries and vice versa. While I don't have a number on the specific deal, we do expect that thanks to the president's leadership and the securement of this historic deal, businesses using TikTok will generate as much as $178 billion in economic activity within the U.S. over the next 4 years. So this is great news, not just for the millions of American youth who use TikTok. Their data will be safe and secure with this new deal. They'll continue to use this very fun app. But it's also great news for all of the small business owners who have really been able to make a living off of the use of TikTok as well.
And if I could just get one more as it relates to China. On crop prices with farmers, as there's still no official trade deal with China, farmers are getting a little bit antsy navigating prices being weak and not strong. How is the administration, thinking about farmers right now? Is there anything we can expect to see from the administration on, sort of bailing farmers out should prices continue to not work in their favor?
Well, the administration is completely understands the anxiety of farmers. We're very much aware of this issue. It has been a part of our discussions, the trade team's discussions with their Chinese counterparts. As for any specific actions, I don't have any news on that for you today, but I can fully assure you the entire National Economic Council in this building, as well as our Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins have been talking with the trade team about this. There's been many meetings on this, and they are on the ball. But I don't have anything specific for you today. Sure, Selena.
Thanks, Caroline. But the case against Letitia James was extensively investigated for 5 months, and President Trump's handpicked Attorney General Eric Siebert could not find any evidence that he committed a crime. So is the president saying here it doesn't matter if there's a crime, he just wants his political enemies to be charged?
Well, let me just walk you through Letitia James. Letitia James completely abused her oath of office. Letitia James was actively and openly engaged in lawfare. You talk about weaponizing the Department of Justice. What was Letitia James's campaign slogan? It was prosecute Donald Trump. She was saying she was going to prosecute Donald Trump before she even knew if Donald Trump committed a crime, which of course we did not. Those are not the words of a serious prosecutor. Those are the words of a corrupt politician who is abusing their power. She actively campaigned on that. She also led the witch hunt, the financial fraud investigation against President Trump and the Trump Organization, and an appeals court tossed that case out, a $500 million civil fraud penalty in August, which was another win for the president, and exonerated him of this witch hunt and showed that this is an individual who is corrupt and abused her oath of office. And we also have evidence of her mortgage fraud. An April report from a white-collar fraud investigator found that there was documented evidence that James engaged in a consistent pattern of financial and property disclosures that raise serious legal questions.
But why won't the president accept the conclusions of his Justice Department to not bring charges against Letitia James? In fact, you had Bondi and Blanche top DOJ leadership who were against ousting Eric Siebert, who again was picked by President Trump.
I just answered that question for you, and the president has every right to express how he feels about these people who literally campaigned on trying to put him in jail, who literally tried to ruin his life and ruin his businesses, and he wants to see accountability for those who abuse their office and abuse their power. And Letitia James absolutely did that, whether you want to admit it or not.
Is that not retribution, though?
Jeff, it's accountability.
Thanks, Caroline. 2 foreign policy questions. President Putin has offered President Trump a 1-year extension of the most recent treaty limiting nuclear weapons. Does the White House have a reaction to that? Does the president want to accept that offer? And then one separate issue, just generally, what is the president's response or reaction to the number of countries this week who are planning to or have recognized a Palestinian state?
2 great questions, Jeff. To your first question about Russia, the president is aware of this offer extended by President Putin, and I'll let him comment on it later. I think it sounds pretty good, but he wants to make some comments on that himself, and I will let him do that. As for all of these Western nations that are recognizing a Palestinian state, the president has been very clear. He disagrees with this decision. He spoke about that in the UK, standing right next to his friend, Prime Minister Starmer, and he feels this does not do anything to release the hostages, which is the primary goal right now in Gaza, does nothing to end this conflict and bring this war to a close. And frankly, he believes it's a reward to Hamas. So he believes these decisions are just more talk and not enough action from some of our friends and allies. And I think you'll hear him talk about that tomorrow at the UN. Kristen.
Thanks, Caroline. Just going back to this Letitia James story. What does President Trump plan to do if the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, tells him that there is not enough evidence to bring his political opponents' cases or to charge those cases?
That's a hypothetical question, Kristen. That hasn't happened at this point.
But we did see one U.S. attorney not be able to find enough evidence, and now they no longer have a job. Is that something that you would consider?
Look, the president stands with Pam Bondi 100%. He made that clear this weekend. He answered questions from all of you last night on Air Force One. He said the same, and that's how he feels at this moment in time.
Just one more thing on the Attorney General.
Go ahead.
Caroline, would the president support designating Russia as a sponsor of terrorism if it does return kidnapped Ukrainian children? And secondly, we just found out through questioning that Hunter Biden sat in on the discussions of his pardons. What's the White House response to that?
Unfortunately, I think it's unsurprising. And it's also very telling that one of the only pardons Joe Biden signed on his way out the door was the pardon of his son. Everything else was signed with an auto pen, but that one was clearly his own signature. To your first question about Russia, I have no news to share with you on that. Sure, in the yellow.
According to media reports, Maduro has sent a letter to President Trump, but President Trump avoided saying whether he has read it. Did he receive it?
We have seen this letter. Frankly, I think there were a lot of lies that were repeated by Maduro in that letter, and the administration's position on Venezuela has not changed. We view the Maduro regime as illegitimate, and the president has clearly shown that he's willing to use any and all means necessary to stop the illegal trafficking of deadly drugs from the Venezuelan regime into the United States of America.
Context of the letter?
Gilbertson, go ahead.
The admin,
you and then go ahead. Sure.
Thank you, Caroline. Whitline with Borderhawk News. The admin has openly discussed taking legal action against officials in sanctuary jurisdictions. Just this last weekend, we saw Mayor of Evanston, Daniel Bliss, rioting and protesting outside an ICE facility near Chicago. Are there plans to start arresting sanctuary mayors or governors going forwards?
Unless they commit a crime, I don't see them being arrested. But if they are violating federal law, if they are violating state law, then of course they should be arrested by state and local law enforcement. If they're violating federal law, then they can expect the consequences of that behavior. Nick.
Thank you, Caroline. Would the president like to see Congress pass a national holiday honoring Charlie Kirk annually?
That's an interesting question. I'm sure he wouldn't oppose such a thing. But you can pose that to him yourself next time you get the chance.
Sure thing. And to follow up, too, I know the president is honoring Charlie with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Is there anything else that we don't know of in the works to honor Charlie?
Not at this time, but we do look forward to that Medal of Freedom ceremony very soon. Daniel.
Thanks, Caroline. This past Friday, Adam Schiff, Tim Kaine, they introduced a resolution on Capitol Hill aimed at stopping the successful kinetic strikes against narco-terrorists in the Caribbean Sea. What does a move like this, what type of message does it send to families, specifically families who have suffered at the hands of deadly narco drugs like these?
I definitely think it sends the wrong message. We wish that Democrats would get on board with a very simple idea of ending drug trafficking and securing our homeland. And I saw a report this morning that the Dominican Republic actually helped us seize a boat that was on its way from Venezuela to the United States of America with lots of deadly drugs on board. And so if you actually hear from Caribbean nations in the region, they are thankful and grateful for the administration's efforts, and they're working alongside us to end this plague of drug trafficking through their seas. Sure, Karen.
Over the weekend, Democratic leaders Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries sent a letter to the White House asking for a meeting with the president to talk about government funding. Has the White House responded to that letter, and will the president sit down with them to talk about this, given that deadline is now 8 days away?
Discussions are ongoing with both Republican and Democratic members of Capitol Hill. I don't have any meetings or any scheduling updates for you today, but what I will share is that what this White House wants and what Republicans want. We want a clean funding extension to keep the government open. That's all we're advocating for, a simple, clean budget extension, a straightforward, responsible solution to keep the government open to November 21st and allow the full year appropriations process to move forward. And I will add, this is the same budget that the Democrats approved 6 months ago, just adjusted for inflation. And unfortunately, all of a sudden now, they want to shut down the government. And if the government is shut down, it's only going to, it will be the fault of the Democrats, and it will only hurt the most vulnerable in our country, our seniors, our veterans, our military families, and increasing security for members of Congress, which is something this White House and the administration supports. And if you look back at the statements made by Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries in the past, they too have advocated against a shutdown and for keeping the government open. Democrat Chuck Schumer himself said a shutdown would mean chaos and pain and needless heartache for the American people. He said once, avoiding a shutdown is very good news for the country, for our veterans, for parents and children, for farmers, and for small businesses. Hakeem Jeffries also said it's about the harm. Families will be hurt if there is a government shutdown. Farmers will be hurt. Holiday travel will be impacted. Democrats clearly know what the right thing to do is here. It's to join with Republicans to pass this clean funding extension. That's what the White House and the president wants. And with that, we will see you all at 4 o'clock for this big announcement later on. Thanks, guys.